The RNA viruses typically results in a benign form of conjunctivitis, whereas the DNA viruses are associated with vision-threatening forms of inflammation. Adenovirus is the most common etiology of viral conjunctivitis and contributes to approximately 65 to 75% of the whole of the cases. Now, the DNA viruses are mainly the adenovirus, the herpes simplex virus, molluscum contagiosum viruses, and varicella zoster, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, and vaccinia and variola viruses. The RNA viruses mainly include the paramyxovirus, which contains the Coxsackie virus and the enterovirus, and some less common viruses which do not result in very significant inflammation of the ocular surface. The symptoms that, as we all know, mainly the patient presents to us with pain, redness, foreign body sensation, irritation, watering, itching, mild photophobia, transient blurring of vision, lid swelling, etc. Most of the time the patient might have a little bit of a systemic symptom in the form of fever, sore throat, and other infection of the other systems like diarrhea, genital and urinary tract infection. At times we can even get patients with systemic symptoms presenting with conjunctivitis. The signs that we can elicit are mainly lid edema, lymphadenopathy, conjunctival hyperemia and follicles, conjunctival hemorrhages, keratitis in the form of epithelial microcyst in the very early phases, punctate epithelial keratitis, anterior stromal infiltrates, and pseudodendritic epithelial formations. And also in very rarely patients can have an anterior uveitis also. The clinical hallmark of most of the viral infection is a follicular reaction of the conjunctiva. What are these follicles? These are the macro appearance of aggregates of lymphocytes surrounded by plasma and mast cells in the superficial conjunctival stroma. These lymphocytes and immune cells displaces the blood vessels peripherally, and what we will see is an yellowish white oval mound with dilated blood vessels in the periphery. Now coming on to the specific viral infection, as the most common and infection is the adenoviral, I will be discussing in detail about the adenoviral infections. Adenovirus is a DNA virus which mainly causes infection in the eyes, genitourinary system, respiratory system, etc. In the eye, 4 different clinical presentation can occur. Pharyngoconjunctival fever being the commonest, epidemic keratoconjunctivitis being the severest, acute non-specific follicular conjunctivitis can also be seen. Also a chronic variant can also be caused by the adenoviruses. Now coming on to the pharyngoconjunctival fever, the serotypes that are involved are 3, 4 and 7 mainly. They can be transmission as through personal contact, fomites, or through swimming pools or ponds. The clinical features will be, as the name suggests, pharyngitis, associated follicular conjunctivitis, fever, and we might get preauricular and cervical lymph nodes on palpation. The incubation period is typically 2 to 14 days, and the communicability extremely high during the first several days, and even it might last 2 weeks after the onset of symptoms. Mostly it starts as a unilateral disease, but subsequently other eye is also involved, and most commonly it is a bilateral infection. Symptoms will be abrupt onset of itching, irritation, abundant serous discharge, which may result in crusting of the superior and inferior eyelashes. The signs that we will get are hyperemia, which will be more in the inferior conjunctiva, mild punctate keratitis. Now coming on to epidemic keratoconjunctivitis, the etiological serovars are 8, 19, 37 and 54 also are implicated. Most severe. The transmission is same as by personal contact, swimming pool, water, etc. Marked photophobia, and the most important feature is that it will result in approximately 80% cases in a keratitis. But there will be minimal extraocular manifestation, but severe stromal involvement, which will differentiate it from pharyngoconjunctival fever. 50% of cases are unilateral here. The conjunctival involvement will be in the form of diffuse hyperemia, mixed follicular and papillary reaction. Subconjunctival hemorrhages can be present. True or pseudo membranes due to the intense inflammation can be seen. These membranes can rub against the cornea and form epithelial defects, which may create a confusion of HSV keratitis. Typically, stages of adenoviral epidemic conjunctivitis is explained. In the very much earlier phase, epithelial vesicle-like elevations are seen, which may not be even appreciable on the slit lamp. In stage 1, these elevations are easily visible and can be demonstrated with fluorescein. These epithelial protrusions cause dark holes in the stained tear film. That is, the elevations will not take stain and it will be seen as black holes. In stage 2, which may persist for 2 to 5 days, it is characterized by the coalescence of all these vesicles and also the deeper epithelial layer started involving in the stage 2. In stage 3, faint subepithelial infiltrates starts appearing in the compromised areas of epithelium. In stage 4, classical subepithelial infiltrates are seen, and in the later phases, the subepithelial opicities may persist with punctate epithelial granularity. Now coming on to subepithelial infiltrates, it starts manifest anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks following the acute phase. Usually the central and the paracentral areas are involved. The limbus is generally not involved. Histologically, they are comprised of residual antigen of the virus and lymphocytic accumulation, which gets adhered to the stromal cells in the cornea. It may persist for months to years following resolution, resulting in symptoms like photophobia and blurring of vision in the patient. Membrane formation. Adenoviral infection can cause both true and pseudomembranes. Pseudomembranes are actually fibrin-rich exudates lacking blood or lymphatic vessels, and the underlying epithelium will be normal. Whereas in true membranes, there is exudation over the substantia propria of mucous membrane, that is, the epithelium will be absent. These true membranes will bleed on touch, whereas the pseudomembranes we can easily remove. Removal of these membranes are important to prevent complications like conjunctival fibrosis, long-term sequelae like corneal lesions and resulting scarring. The other form of conjunctivitis that adenovirus can cause is a non-specific follicular conjunctivitis. This can be caused by any virus. So it is the most common form of viral conjunctivitis in general. Symptoms can be watering, redness, irritation, itching, mild photophobia. Contralateral eye is involved in next 1 to 2 days. Systemic symptoms are associated. It's a milder form. The adenovirus can also result in a chronic relapsing adenoviral conjunctivitis. It is usually seen in immunocompromised patients. It can persist over years. Eventually, it will undergo remission. Usually, investigation is not needed. But if you feel that there is no response to the treatment or something atypical feature is there, investigation can be done. Giemsa stain, mononuclear cells are seen in adenoviral conjunctivitis. PCR, sensitive and specific investigation. Viral culture is the gold standard, but it will take time. So if you want rapid diagnosis in 1 to 2 days, a PCR or an antigen testing is better. Now coming on to the management, we in our day-to-day life see many patients of viral conjunctivitis. So we all should know how to properly manage a case of viral conjunctivitis. As of now, there is no clinical evidence on any specific antiviral agent being clinically beneficial for viral conjunctivitis. So, as you all know, generally we don't prescribe any antiviral agent when a patient comes to us with viral conjunctivitis. So, our aim in treating such a patient is to prevent the transmission, that is in the household, as well as from a patient the clinician can himself get infected. So that is to be prevented, and also the patient should not go into any complication, and the patient will be having severe symptoms. So giving symptomatic relief to the patient should be our aim. So we have to counsel him about the general measures regarding meticulous hand hygiene, the need for him to isolate himself, personal contacts are to be avoided, eye rubbing should be avoided, sharing of towels, frequent hand washing has to be encouraged, and also once we examine the patient, we should take care that before seeing other patients, we have to properly do hygiene of our hands, and also any instrument that we used has to be disinfected before going on to examine the other patient. Symptomatic treatment is in the form of artificial tears, frequent administration. Generally, we give for 2-hourly administration. Cold compresses can be advised if there is associated itching, anti-allergics. Topical antibiotic prophylaxis against any secondary and microbial infection can be given. If there are pseudomembranes, then those needs to be removed. Now, topical anti-inflammatory therapy. According to the evidence, starting a mild to moderate potent corticosteroid treatment initially in the acute phase itself can lead to rapid resolution of conjunctivitis. But the American Academy of Preferred Practice guidelines suggest these indications for starting steroid treatment, which is mainly marked chemosis, marked lid swelling, epithelial sloughing, membranous conjunctivitis, and if there is corneal involvement. It can be, the steroid can be used either alone or in combination with anti-infective, that is antibiotic drops, dexamethasone in a lower dose 0.1%, prednisolone 0.2%, loteprednol 0.5 or fluoromethalone can be used. Combination with anti-infective, it is seen that both the infectious and the inflammatory components will be taken care of and it will be beneficial for the patient also. But while starting the patient with steroid has its benefits as well as risks. The benefits are that there will be rapid relief from the ocular symptoms, corneal involvement will be prevented even though there is no evidence, but it is seen that there is lesser prevalence of corneal involvement if the patient is already started on steroid drops. Prevent scarring, early resolution of corneal lesions if at all it has developed. The risks involved are, while patient is started on steroid, the viral replication can enhance and thereby the course of the disease can get prolonged. There is potential for prolonging adenoviral infections and worsening HSV infection. So HSV keratitis, epithelial keratitis is a contraindication for steroid drops. So if accidentally you start thinking that adenoviral infection, rather it was an HSV and you started it, then it can result in worsening of the HSV keratitis. Chronic use can result in cataract and glaucoma. So the risk should be weighed with the benefits before starting steroid in a patient. If you can follow up the patient regularly and if you feel there is severe symptoms, starting a low dose steroid will not do any harm to the patient if combined with anti-infective treatment. Now, steroid sparing agents, this is mainly when you have to use steroid in a patient who is steroid responsive or when the steroid treatment has to be prolonged because of the dense subepithelial infiltrates. In such cases, cyclosporin A, all these concentrations are clinically effective according to the studies. Tacrolimus, a 0.03%, even it has shown that it has more benefit than topical dexamethasone with less side effects. So you can use cyclosporin or tacrolimus whenever you feel that the patient needs a prolonged course of steroid. This was a study which was done comparing steroids with cyclosporin and with topical artificial lubricants only. It was seen that cyclosporin was better than this palliative treatment with just artificial tears, but the efficacy was little bit less than that of steroids. Now coming on to a specific treatment agent. As we all know, there is high chance that it will spread from one person to another. So why don't we have a prophylactic agent even now? Or why is there no drug available to prevent transmission from one person to another? There are multiple studies being conducted, but no single antiviral is FDA approved for adenoviral infections. Multiple agents under evaluation include several antiviral agents, povidone, which is an antiseptic agent, combination of dexamethasone with povidone, immunoglobulin-based therapy, and the newer future treatments that are being investigated are sialic acid analogs, cold atmospheric plasma, chlorotaurin, and even benzalkonium chloride. Antiviral agents, multiple agents were studied, like ganciclovir 0.5% is the only one which had some activity against adenovirus types, and also there was inhibitory effect on these serotypes. We can use ganciclovir 0.15% gel if you feel that there is significant infection which is not responding to the conservative treatment. Cidofovir was tried, but ocular side effects were more than the benefit. It is not preferred. Brincidofovir, which is a lipid-linked derivative of cidofovir, has lesser side effects, and but conclusive evidence for human use is yet to be available. Povidone, it's a broad-spectrum microbicide solution. It's synthetic carrier homopolymer which has no innate germicidal abilities combined with iodine which has the germicidal ability. So the amount of free iodine released will determine the antimicrobial activity of povidone. In-office irrigation of povidone 5% or lesser concentration drops like 0.2% or 0.4% drops, which can be given 3 times per day, both have seen to have reduction in inflammatory symptoms of epidemic keratoconjunctivitis. The mechanism of action is both at the host level as well as at the pathogen level. As povidone acts on multiple adenovirus serotypes, and it is believed that one infection from adenovirus has multiple serovars involved, this is an effective treatment for adenoviral conjunctivitis. So multiple studies have been done in this regard. It was seen that it has antiviral activity against 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 when it is applied for 1 to 5 minutes, and against type 37 and type 64 when applied for a prolonged duration. Concentration of povidone was not significant. It was the time of exposure which was seen to be deciding factor. This was a study in which 0.5% povidone was given in TDS dosage for 7 to 21 days. It was found that there was faster recovery from disease at 2 weeks. There is a combination. Here is a study with a combination of povidone 0.4% with dexamethasone, which was the first successful study in humans, which found that the viral efficacy of the povidone with anti-inflammatory effect of dexamethasone was seen to have better efficacy than either alone. Now, complications of adenoviral conjunctivitis can be in the form of corneal involvement, which can be subepithelial infiltrates, corneal scarring with neovascularization, the membrane-related scarring of the conjunctiva with resultant symblepharon, entropion or ectropion formation, secondary bacterial infection which can lead to keratitis and perforation. So all these complications might need surgical management. Otherwise, in a normal case, there is no surgical management is required. PTK can be done for corneal scarring. It can be combined with MMC for better results. If there is significant fibrotic remodeling of the conjunctiva, fornix repair with associated lid anomaly defect can be repaired. If associated keratitis with perforation is there, patient might require keratoplasty. Chronic post-conjunctivitis dry eye disease is another complication which might require management. Now coming on to other viral infections that you should know. Acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis typically caused by paramyxovirus, enterovirus type 70 and Coxsackie type A24. It also is a sudden presence in the form of sudden onset of pain, tearing, foreign body sensation, conjunctival injection and subconjunctival hemorrhages with periorbital swelling. Shorter incubation time, a more rapid disease and no corneal involvement can differentiate it from EKC. Confirmation can be by cultures and RT-PCR. It's a self-limiting condition. Symptomatic treatment is needed and patient counseling. HSV conjunctivitis can happen as part of both primary or recurrent herpetic disease, usually caused by HSV type 1. The disease is more unilateral and also has a shorter clinical course, thereby differentiating from adenoviral infections. Both follicular conjunctivitis can be seen with associated typical lid or corneal lesions. As such, but conjunctivitis alone if present, we will rather diagnose it as adenovirus and hence it is often misdiagnosed. An HSV infection in a neonate is fatal and will require aggressive management. The symptoms are in the form of itching, foreign body sensation and lacrimation. The signs can be mucus discharge, conjunctival hyperemia, follicular reaction. Corneal lesions like dendritic ulcer or SPKs can be seen. Management is infections if needed can be done if the case is atypical, we need investigations. Cell cultures are the gold standard, but specifically we have to mention as the cells that is to be used for adenovirus and herpes simplex are different. So if we are suspecting HSV, we have to specifically mention to do culture with all those cells which are for HSV. Giemsa stain RT-PCR will give better results in a lesser duration, whereas cell culture will take time. Treatment in neonate if an HSV infection is present, topical as well as intravenous acyclovir should be given. Non-neonatal cases, if there is no corneal involvement, there is no need to use antiviral agents as such. If there is associated keratitis, anti-ointment Acivir can be used. Molluscum contagiosum is another virus. It's a double-stranded DNA pox virus. Typically affects otherwise healthy children. Age group is usually 2 to 4 years. Auto-inoculation is the mode of spread. Chronic follicular conjunctivitis will result with mild discharge and irritation. There will be pale waxy umbilicated nodule on the lash line. Confluent cutaneous lesions can be seen in immunocompromised patients. These lesions can rub on the cornea and also result in corneal corneal infections also. The treatment is symptomatic. If the lesion is very big, this lesion can be excised or curated. Few uncommon viral infections, varicella zoster can result in small ulcerative flictinule-like lesions at the limbus. And Epstein-Barr virus can result in subconjunctival hemorrhages, keratitis, uveitis. Treatment is usually not specific. Specific treatment is not needed for these Epstein-Barr viral infections. Variola and vaccinia can also result in conjunctivitis. Antiviral treatment can be given. Cytomegalovirus mainly results in chorioretinitis. Otherwise, healthy individuals can have a follicular conjunctivitis. No specific treatment is needed for such conjunctivitis by cytomegalovirus. Points to remember is that appropriate treatment in the early clinical period is key to prevent any complication. You should be confident in knowing how to treat a case of conjunctivitis, when to follow up, when to start steroids, and what all precautions to be explained to the patient after diagnosing conjunctivitis. And also you should be taking all the precautions. It's a highly contagious disease. During and after examining such a case in the OPD, then to use steroid judiciously and watch out for any exacerbation of infection or steroid related side effects. Thank you.
Nupur is there, Dr. Nupur? Dr. Nupur,
Yes,
do you
ma'am.
want to say something? Do you want to say, add anything to it? I think she
Any
presented
questions?
very well.
Okay, there is a good presentation, Nimi. There is a question in the. Nimi, can you read out the question and answer if possible, and
What is
then we
the
can.
What is the sensitivity of
sensitivity?
RT-PCR in detection of HSV and HSLV conjunctivitis or keratitis? The sensitivity is
So you do.
around 8. Ma'am?
How you answer the question
80%
as per evidence available?
80% almost sensitivity is there. So in our center, what we usually do is a tear strip is placed to take PCR sample, and we can send to our micro lab for HSV PCR. We'll get the report in 1 to 2 days. Then that is what we can, about 80% sensitivity is there.
Can we
Yes.
can we stop sharing so that we can see everybody? Yes. Videos on, please, all of you. Videos on, videos on, videos on. Videos on. Only the exam going is video oning. What is this? Oh, everybody. Okay. So RT-PCR for HSV, HZV, you've told already. What is the surgical management of viral keratoconjunctivitis? Diksha? What did she tell you in the surgical management? Amog, you can get up.
Ma'am, for the complications of viral, like we have persistent subepithelial opacities, we can go for PRK.
She talked about something, na? Not PRK. She said PTK. For the
PTK.
subepithelial opacities, you do PTK with mitomycin C. Okay.
Mitomycin.
So you should pay attention to this. Nupur, anything else you want to tell them?
On the question that Diksha asked, we can also take PCR sample from the epithelium if you have epithelial keratitis, apart from the which is more specific than the tear samples. And steroids are only indicated when the subepithelial immunoinfiltrates involve the visual axis. You should not give steroids in all cases of adenoviral conjunctivitis. Any questions?
So where is Prasun?
No,
Prasun, what are the drugs that she talked of that you can give for adenoviral nummular opacities? Prasun, Pradeep.
Yes, ma'am.
What drugs can you give for those resistant kind of nummular opacities that you have in adenoviral keratoconjunctivitis?
Ma'am, ganciclovir, cidofovir.
For those opacities. Diksha?
Ma'am, we usually start with topical steroids can be given if they are involving the visual axis.
What else? So you will always, you
And
don't
if-
want the central part of the cornea to scar. Because if the central part of the cornea scars, the patient is going to lose his or her best corrected visual acuity. So when do you start topical steroid in nummular opacities? When the opacities are
Central.
present in the visual axis.
Visual.
Or
And
when, yeah, so when they are in the visual axis and you don't want that to drop because if they scar, then they'll cause a permanent decrease in the best corrected visual acuity. So always start topical steroids and then add a topical cyclosporin or topical tacrolimus to it. And as the scars or as the opacities they decrease, you will withdraw topical steroids and continue on topical cyclosporin or tacrolimus. Okay, and if there is recurrence, what is the definition of recurrence? How many times do they recur when you say that there is a recurrence and now you have to start topical steroids? If there is a recurrence more than twice, then you, even if they are peripheral, you should start topical steroids. Okay, all right.
Okay.
Anybody wants to ask anything, or should we go to the next one?
Ma'am, cyclosporin.
Why are other people so resistant to showing their videos? I can't understand. When I say only the exam going ones they put on, otherwise others are all. Wherever you are, it doesn't matter. What did you say, Diksha?
Ma'am, cyclosporin
something.
2% is usually used for graft rejection. Do we also use this concentration for conjunctivitis?
No, we don't use 2%.
No.
If you use cyclosporin, if you use, actually what they say, up to 1% if you use, it is useful. But 1% you don't get, you have to get commercially made. So in the market, you get 0.05% and 0.1%. So short of 1%, you can even give 0.01%, which is commercially available in the market. But classically, what is shown to give results is 1%.
Okay.
Nupur, you would want to add something?
No, ma'am. In the current scenario, Nimi, can you add about COVID conjunctivitis because that's also relevant?
Yeah, that's very relevant. COVID conjunctivitis. It was very good. You pointed out. Where is Nimmi Raj?
Nimi.
Hi, ma'am. Ma'am,
Please quickly about COVID conjunctivitis also.
conjunctivitis in COVID is seen very rarely. The reported incidence is less than 0.3% as far as I remember. And symptomatic treatment is only needed. Ma'am, nothing more than that I know. Nupur ma'am might be able to-
Okay. That is fine. So symptomatic treatment, but it is more associated with severe form of COVID rather than mild form of COVID. And you can extract the virus from the tears of COVID patients. And secondly, there is a meta-analysis, but it says around 1%. So we should know, we should be aware. That is very important. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Nupur. Thank you. We move on to the next one. Now you can put your videos off and you can listen, but I will ask.
Next presenter.
Yes, sir. So, can we have the presentation, please? Can we put on the presentation? Share the screen, please. Yes, from LT6.
Good afternoon, respected Chief Sir, other faculty members, and dear colleagues. I am here to present a symposium on macular hole. History-wise, the NAP first described a macular hole in 1869. The most important thing is the gas gave the grading of macular hole in 1988. The Kelly and the Wendell was the first to introduce the surgical repair of the macular hole in 1991. The little anatomy of the fovea is like the diameter of the fovea is around 1500 micrometer. The layer absent at the fovea were the inner plexiform layer, ganglion cell layer, and the nerve fiber layer. The vitreous attached firmly at the vitreous base, peripapillary, and the retinal vessels at the fovea. The retinal hole is defined as the full thickness defect of the retinal tissue involving the anatomical fovea. Epidemiology. The prevalence of the macular hole was 33 per 1 lakh population. There is female more than male, 3:1. The peak incidence is noted in the 7th decade. 80% is idiopathic, 10% traumatic, mostly unilateral, and 0 to 29% are bilateral. The pathophysiology, that how macular hole develops, is very inconclusive, but 3 basic theories regarding the etiology was given. The first was the traumatic theory. Many of the first reported cases of macular holes were in the young, and trauma accounted for approx 50% cases. So in traumatic macular hole, we can see here, this is the traumatic macular hole. The trauma is responsible for 7 to 9% of all full thickness macular holes. The direct traumatic disruption of the macular area, which leads to the post-contusion necrosis of the area leading to the macular hole. There may be presence of, not in particular in this case, but there may be presence of subfoveal hemorrhage in case of traumatic macular hole. There is a vitreous traction over the fovea as a result of the equatorial expansion of the globe. Second theory was the vascular or the cystoid degeneration theory, supported by the histopathological evidence of the cystoid degeneration in the surrounding tissue of the macular hole. And the third theory was given by the Lister and modified by Gass and Johnson vitreous theory. There is a focal shrinkage of the perifoveal vitreous cortex. There is a tangential traction on the foveal area, and the detached edge rarely elevated above the parafoveal retina. Other theory was anomalous PVD. That anomalous PVD lead to the vitroschisis, partial thickness, and there is a vitropapillar adhesion. The centrifugal contraction, that is outward contraction, can lead to the macular hole. This is given by Seebeck J. The anterior posterior traction, the PVD begins in the posterior pole around the macula and gradually spreads with focal attachment to the foveal center. These focal attachments create retinal convexity consistent with the anteroposterior traction. So the classification, the Gass and the Johnson classification, and there is OCT classification. In stage 1A, that is impending hole, there is a presence of progressive loss of the foveal depression. There is a presence of yellow spot, the split of the retina at the fovea, and there is no vitrofoveal separation in the stage 1A. The OCT classification corresponding to 1A classification was the perifoveal detachment of the posterior hyaloid with focal adhesion of vitreous to macula leads to mechanical deformation of the fovea with pseudocyst formation. In stage 1B, that is occult hole, there is a presence of yellow ring, and there is a posterior extension of the pseudocyst with the disruption of the outer retinal layer. There is no vitrofoveal separation. The traction and the OCT, the traction of the fovea by perifoveal hyaloid, the foveal cyst extending till outer layers causing break in the outer layers. In stage 2, there is eccentric oval or crescentic retinal defect, central round retinal defect with rim of the elevated retina with pseudo operculum. Sometimes we can see there is a pseudo operculum formation. In OCT, there is a partial opening of the roof of the cyst. Here you can see the partial opening of the roof of the cyst with operculum still attached to the whole edge. Posterior hyaloid is still attached to the operculum. In stage 3, there is no V's ring, there is no PVD, but pseudo operculum we see there is a presence of pseudo operculum. In stage 3, there is a full thickness macular hole. The only difference is that the posterior hyaloid remains attached to the optic disc, but it is detached from the macular surface. In stage 4, you can see there is a PVD present detached from the optic disc. There is a central round defect, and we can see the V's ring. This is the biomicroscopic staging of idiopathic macro hole in normal fovea. In stage 1, we can see there is a vitreous contraction with foveal detachment. This is the foveal detachment. In stage 1b, that is occult, we can see the dehiscence of the photoreceptors. And stage 2, there is a separation of cortex from retinal surface to form the pseudo-operculum. This is the pseudo-operculum, which is formed in stage 2. In stage 3, there is a separation of pseudo-operculum from S2 hole. There is the pseudo-operculum starts separating, and in stage 4, there is a complete vitreous separation. The International Vitreomacular Traction Study classification given in 2013. What important was they also give the full thickness macular hole, which they said there is a small, medium, and large. The most small was they described less than 250 microns, medium was 250 to 400 microns, and this is if there is large is 400 microns. They also give the vitreomacular adhesion and the vitreomacular traction. So idiopathic full thickness macular hole, the sign and symptoms. The patient will present with like blurred central vision. The usual range of vision is from 20/82 to 20/400, averaging at 20/200. The patient will complain of metamorphopsia, and there will be chance of central scotoma. The biomicroscopic slit lamp with 90 degree examination done with the full thickness macular hole. There is a we can see there is a round excavation, well-defined borders interrupting the beam of like size is ranging from 100 to 883 micrometer, average around 500. Sometimes we can see the pseudo-operculum overlying the overlying semi-translucent tissue suspended over the hole. We can also see here in this case the subretinal surrounding cuff of fluid. The cystic changes of the retina may also be evident of the margins of the hole. There can also be, we can see this fine crinkling caused by, this is the crinkling of the retinal vessels. Here in this case we can see. So there is a fine crinkling caused by epiretinal membrane, may rarely be seen. So modalities for diagnosis are Watzke-Allen sign. Here the narrow slit will be around 50 to 100 microns centered over the macula. Patient will report a break in the line. The sensitivity is less, but the specificity is 100%. Other test we can do is laser aiming beam test. The 50 micrometer aiming beam was applied. The disappearance of a spot in full thickness macular hole noted by the patient. The sensitivity is 94%. Specificity is 100%. Other test we can do is Amsler grid. The patient will note either the bowing of the line, either we can tell micropsia. It is sensitive but not very specific. And other test macular perimetry using scanning laser ophthalmoscope. Here we can see this is the Amsler grid, how the patient will note, and this is the Watzke-Allen test, how the patient will perceive the single line, he will perceive the break in the line. This is a very much important thing, the macular hole indices. Here in this particular macular hole we can see this is the base, this is the minimum MLD, this is the minimum least dimension, this is the height of the macular hole, and this is the arm, C and D is the arm. So macular hole index is defined as, this is the height upon base upon height, like E by A. This is the height, E is the height, and A is the base. So in particular in this case the value was 0.411. So it is not prognosis wise it has said that if MHI is more than 0.5, it's associated with better visual outcome. But in this case this is 0.411. The hole forming factor is C plus D. C is the one arm, D is the other arm. So C plus D divided by the base. It is, in this case this is 0.75. The significance is like if it is more than 0.9, there is more chance of hole closure, and if it is less than 0.5, there is less chance of hole closure. The traction on hole index is the E by B. The E is the height and B is the MLD, the least dimension. If it is more than 1.41, this is good visual prognosis. So again the MHI is, now we know the MHI is ratio calculated from the OCT transverse images of the macular area. It is a ratio between the hole height and the base diameter. So low MHI results in the anatomical failures. The differential diagnosis was the pseudo holes. In pseudo holes there is no tissue defect. Here we can see this is the ERM. The ERM is caused, this is centripetal contraction of the ERM which results in the pseudo hole formation, but there is no as such tissue defect. Vision equality may be normal or decreased. There is no evidence of any relapse of retinal fluid, and the prognosis was good. Other we can confuse with laminar. This is the laminar macular hole. So in this laminar macular hole, there is the inner fovea disruption of the inner fovea, and there is a deroofing of the foveal cyst. So foveal telangiectasia is the other DD. We can confuse with CME, RP atrophy at that area. In the ERM, 4.1 months. The stage 2 is the progression to stage 3 and 4 occurs in 67 to 90%, 96% cases over 6 months. In stage 3, the 50% increase in size over 3 years, and stage 4, the 16% increase in size over 3 years. The management part, the surgical management is indicated in stage 2, 3 and 4. The pars plana vitrectomy with gas tamponade with 1 or 2 weeks face down positioning. The main objective is to surgery to relieve all the vitreomacular traction.
How long is it essential for the hold of position?
Sir, 24 to 72 hours, 3 to 5 days, or within.
कुछ नहीं आता था. Useless. आगे चलो.
Sir, the Kelly and the Wendell described the technique of vitrectomy, the ERM peeling, the fluid gas exchange, and the face down positioning. The success rate at that time was the 58%. Now the Icard et al. Described the current gold standard technique of the PP with ILM peeling. The inverted ILM flap technique was given by Michael Weska in 2010. Success rate in the range of 85% to 95%. So basic surgical steps was the step is the pars plana vitrectomy, the removal of the posterior halide or ERM if any, the ILM peeling by dye-assisted, fluid gas exchange, the gas tamponade we can give either 20% SF6 or 40% C3 or strict face down position. So the surgical, what are the surgical predictors for the outcomes? Like duration of the hole. If the duration of hole is more than 6 months, poor outcome. Less than 6 months is a better outcome. The size of
the always 24. What do you restrict for example?
strict is less 6.
You confuse me at least. I don't know what the other.
6 to 9 hours strict is important, sir. First 6 to 9 hours is important.
Okay.
Sir, as we know, the surgical outcome is very good in the macular hole surgery with the modern. This is the pre-operative SOCT, and this is the post-op. Now here we can see the ILM remnants also. The hole is closed. Here is the surgical video to the phaco with PPV with ILM peeling done in this case. Now we put the tricot to assist for PVD induction. Here is the PVD is induced. The peripheral vitrectomy is being done. Now ILM peeling is done with pinch and the pinch technique, pinch and the peel technique.
When you do the PVD induction, what lens are you using?
What, sir?
What lenses are you using on the corner?
Sir, Chalam lens is being used, sir. Flat lens.
So up China Chalam. So when you are doing PVD induction, what was the lens you were using?
Sir, during PVD induction, I used wide angle lens, sir, wide angle viewing system.
Which one? Contact?
Sir, contact lens. Sir, contact wide angle system, sir. Contact wide angle lens. Mini quad.
Which lens?
Mini quad lens, sir.
Mini quad XL.
Mini quad XL. The 1 month follow up. So why we do ILM peeling in macular hole surgery? The ILM is 2.5 micrometer thick, which is the smooth towards the vitreous and the irregularities on the retinal surface due to the foot process of the Muller cells. ILM may act as a scaffold for the cellular proliferation. ILM around macular hole contains myofibrocytes, and contraction of these is suggested to cause the enlargement of the macular hole and prevents hole closure. So positioning is very much important. The force is here we can see. Here we can see if there we are not doing positioning, so air bubble is towards not towards the macular hole area. This is the macular hole, healing macular. But if we give patient to the face down position, so there is a macular hole. The force is greatest at the apex of the arc of the contact, and by sustaining an arcuate face joint position, the macular maximum vector forces can be directed against the macular hole. The intraocular, the use of the intraocular tamponade, it facilitates reapposition of the hole edges by the buoyant forces that pushes the retina against the underlying RP. Interface with the vitreous fluid component serve as a template for fibrin membrane and glial migration across the macular hole. The inverted ILM flap technique of large macula is given by the Maculvesca. So the conclusion of this study was the inverted ILM flap technique prevents the post-operative flat open appearance of macular hole and prevents both the functional and the anatomical outcome of vitrectomy for holes with a diameter of more than 400 micrometer. So some newer techniques of the internal limiting membrane, the free flap technique given by Morrison et al. And there is autologous neurosensor free flap given by Grewal and Mahmood. This is our home study, RPC study. There is a comparative evaluation of anatomical and the functional outcome using BBG versus triamcinolone assisted ILM peeling in macular surgery Indian population by Professor Atul Kumar sir.
Is there the study where they have done only partial ILM peeling, only temporal flap? Not full peeling from all sides of the hole, only one side temporal flap is put on the hole.
Yes, sir. It's done in sir PGI Chandigarh, sir.
No, you don't speak like this. You're an SL, senior resident. You think yourself to be one. What is that study where they said only temporal flap? What is the advantage? What layer gets affected when you don't peel, when you peel ILM?
Sir, RNFL sir will get affected, sir, if you don't.
What is Donfil?
Sir, dissociated optic nerve fiber layer, sir.
Optic nerve your teeth.
Sir, this is the another study, sir, done under guidance of our Professor Atul Kumar, sir. Is a tapping of the macular hole edges, a novel technique for surgery in macular holes with lower macular index and an outcome. The conclusion where the newer technique of tapping the macular hole edges appears to be provide acceptable anatomical and functional success rates in eye with large macular holes. Other adjuvant therapy we can use for macular hole surgery like autologous serum, platelet consent. Why we should need the stain of the ILM? That by staining the ILM we can easily move and reduces the operating time and reduces the mechanical trauma to the retina. So various agents used for ILM peeling were indocyanine green, the infracyanine green, the trypan blue, the patent blue, and the BBG dye, and the triamcinolone acetate. In the newer dyes were the infracyanine green and the brilliant BBG dye. The ICG concentration previously used were 0.6 to 5 mg per ml, but it selectively stains it associated with potential substitution of the indocyanine green. This decreased mitochondrial enzyme activity in the retinal pigment epithelial cells and increased cell death after exposure to indocyanine green. So other dye was the trypan blue used in the concentration of 0.06 to 0.2%. The exposure time was 1 to 2 minutes, but it stains ERM as well as ILM. It is not selectively stain the ILM. This is a comparative study. The trypan blue, it is a diazo compound blue colored water soluble vital dye. Concentration used were 0.06 mg per ml. It stains dead tissue like ERM, but it does not stain ILM so effectively. The other, like, what is the patterns of hole closure given by Imai et al. That categorize the repaired macular hole into 3 patterns with OCT. So this is a U type, V type, and the W type. The post-operative visual acuity well correlates with these patterns. Like the visual acuity more in the U type than V type and the W type. There is also chances of spontaneous resolution of the idiopathic macular hole in which is around 3 to 6%. The factors affecting were the young patient, the macular hole to be small or like less than 1/3 this diameter without a fluid cup. It is closed in 3 to 6 months after macular formation. reported with micro holes given by Kearns like 50 to 100 micron meter result of acute enterofacial vitreotraction. So what is the mechanism of spontaneous hole closure? There are three type hypotheses, like glial cells or retinal pigment epithelial cells proliferate from each bank of the hole edges to fill the hole bottom and close the hole. The Lewis et al. Given that the epiretinal membrane that forms around the hole is contracts and let the hole close. And this is the Takashi et al. Study that operculum in the vitreous reattaches to the hole edges and lets the hole close. So the outcome of the anatomical success defined as the complete disappearance of the cuff of the fluid that surround the macular holes and edges of the macular hole are opposed firmly to the RP. The visual success was defined as the improvement in the post-operative visual acuity of the at least 2 or more Snellen's lines over the pre-operative visual acuity. The complication during macular surgery can be lead to iatrogenic retinal tears 2 to 19% in mainly in the inferior retina. RD can occur in 3%. Nuclear sclerosis 75% by 3-year follow-up, hole reopening, hole enlargement, visual field defect, phototoxic injuries, CME, endophthalmitis, and CNVM. So the conclusion of the release of all possible vitro-macular traction is the key to the successful closure of the macular hole, and alum peeling is the recent widely accepted innovation in the macular hole surgeries. Thank you.
Recent innovation, something else. Can you tell the residents what it is? We might ask them in the exam. What is the recent innovation from Tamer Mahmood?
Sir, Taimur Mahmood did the he's applied. He did the autologous neurosensory retinal free flap technique. He applied the Enzo laser to the area marked for graft harvesting, followed by diathermy to the blood vessels at the edge, and free retinal flap that is 0.5 disc diameter will be larger than the macular size lifted and placed over the hole. But sir, this is not very beneficial as the blood vessels, he cannot transfer the blood vessels, and it is sometimes sir, we have to do the laser over the area where he taken the tissue, sir.
The full thickness retina is cut. First, an artificial RD is created. You should have got a small diagrammatic picture. For a small portion of the retina in the superior part in the periphery is diathermized and cut. Artificial detachment created and cut, and that is slipped under into the hole under the hole, the center. Full thickness retina. So it should be well understood by the persons who are learning from this. So it becomes really difficult to understand. Okay, it's fine.
Thank you, sir.